Hello everyone, my name is Nick, and this week's plant of the week is Hoya curtisii, commonly referred to as the tiny-leaved Hoya or the miniature Hoya. And this is a Hoya I struggled with my first couple attempts at growing this. It wasn't until the last year, I would say, that I've finally gotten the care down. Before, I would bring them home and they would just be stagnant. They wouldn't do anything until they start to wither away, and I'm left with nothing. So I'm thrilled that this specimen right here, I've only had this one for not even a full year at this point. I purchased it last summer and it's grown, probably surpassing 3 feet in vines at this point. And I'm admittedly pretty shocked because none of my Hoyas have ever grown like this, but I think this Hoya for me has been a really big learning experience for how I should be caring for my Hoyas, and is helping me troubleshoot some of the other Hoyas that I have in my home that have been doing nothing for the past couple of years, or perhaps even lost a couple of their leaves and not grown any. So if you are finding yourself in a similar situation to that, stay tuned because hopefully I have some good tips for you. First and foremost, the lighting is the most important thing for Hoyas. Whether it's Hoya curtisii alone or all Hoyas, I think this is gonna go for all Hoyas, but my Hoya curtisii has required the lighting from my east-facing window. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an east-facing window, but that type of exposure is crucial. So I'm sure a west-facing window will compare, perhaps a really bright unobstructed north-facing window, or pulled back a little bit from a south-facing window, or a south-facing window that's utilizing a sheer curtain. There's a bunch of options, but that bright morning sunlight has just been everything that this Hoya has required. And you can see the way that the sun has kind of kissed the foliage, if you will. It's gotten quite sun stressed. You can see how parts of the plant inside the planter have more of that like bronzy color versus the side that's not facing the light has more green coloration. And if we look a little bit closer at the leaves that are on these vines right here that are really just basking in the sunlight all morning long into the mid-afternoon, they are sporting these like bronze color, and what was once like a silver speckle to the leaves is now like this like mint green, which I love this because it's giving me like mint chocolate chip ice cream vibes, which not a lot of plants are giving me that vibe, but the light has just been absolutely crucial. I've been learning from this that I have to give my Hoyas more light. Sometimes I like to bring them home and I like to just stick them in somewhere where it's just gonna look good, and they are usually small and just starting to spill over, so it looks wonderful. But this has really taught me how important it is to supplement light to my Hoyas. So I've been taking care to add some little like grow light installations underneath shelves so that I can supplement my Hoyas a little bit more light. But I would say beyond the grow lights, the natural sunlight has been really what my Hoyas have been leaning towards most. The watering has been pretty straightforward for this Hoya. I'm treating it like many of the other Hoyas that I'm already growing in my home, and watering this roughly like every 7 to 10 days. While Hoyas can dry out completely and withstand being dry for a decent amount of time, you're going to have your best growth with your Hoyas if you're letting them dry out roughly like 75% and then going ahead and giving them a drink. And you also want to be mindful not to overwater your Hoyas, but growing them in more light is going to keep you from overwatering your Hoyas. Also, this planter that I have it inside, it is a ceramic planter, but it's glazed on half of the planter, so I'm sure that's helping not dry out completely compared to a completely unglazed planter or a terracotta planter, which would be totally fine. You would just have to be a little bit more mindful of the watering schedule. And as always with the Hoyas, you want to make sure that you're using a well-draining soil mixture with some additives that the roots could grab onto. Orchid bark is fantastic. I usually like to use a little bit of a finer orchid bark than you're typically going to find in your big box stores, as well as perlite or pumice, some kind of like volcanic rock that's porous that's also going to help add drainage to your soil. So those things are crucial. You can even add some charcoal to your mixture, but I'm never using soil straight from the bag for my Hoyas. That's going to hold onto too much moisture, and it's not going to be aerated enough for your Hoyas to grow to their fullest potential. Temperature-wise, these are going to grow best at roughly 60 to 75 degrees Fahrenheit, and standard household humidity is fine. These prefer like 50% plus humidity, as they're just used to growing in a more humid environment in comparison to some other Hoyas. But this will do fine, like I said, in standard household humidity. You might only just have to be mindful in the winter time, as once that heat kicks on, it'll drop below that standard like 40 to 60% standard household humidity. So that's when you might have some issues with your Hoya, but I personally did not have any issues this past winter, and this was the first winter that I was growing this houseplant. So I feel like if we were going to have problems, it was going to be that first winter, as this houseplant is still acclimating and getting used to my space. Propagating these is very simple. simple. You can probably see how like scary these vines are from all these just like roots that are quite literally just forming all along the plant. So all of these roots that you see here, which I feel like my Hoya curtisii has like a weird amount of roots on it. Like I don't normally see Hoyas with this amount of aerial roots on it, but I digress. I'm sure this is extremely easy to propagate because of that. Let me know if you grow a Hoya curtisii and yours has as many roots as mine, because mine freaking looks like a centipede legs with the way it's creeping down, especially at the areas that are still yet to grow their foliage. But as long as I submerge these roots in a potting medium, whether it's soil or sphagnum moss or even just some water, this should root up totally fine. I like to often put my cuttings inside like a Ziploc plastic bag or like a Tupperware container to help them root quicker with the higher humidity. So that's something you can keep in mind there, or use some rooting hormone as well to try to increase root production. And these are the toxic to animals. There's not a lot of information on Hoyas. On the ASPCA website, I believe it says Hoyas are non-toxic, but they do produce a latex sap. So to my knowledge, these are moderately toxic to pets. So I would try to keep them out of reach. But I'm willing to bet if you have a houseplant that's hanging like this, it's probably going to be out of reach of your pets hanging up. And speaking of pests, which I kind of said instead of pets there, you do have to be mindful of mealybug on your Hoyas. Fortunately, I don't think I have any issues on these right now, but I do have to just keep an eye out on all of my Hoyas, as Hoyas across the board can be decently susceptible to mealybug, especially if they are stressed out. Not necessarily sun stress, that's just how the leaf coloration looks, but if they are stressed, as if they are maybe receiving too much water or not enough water, or they're not in enough sunlight, then you can have some problems. And that's where I found the most mealybug problems on my Hoyas in my home. And last but not least, fertilizing. Hoyas are decently light feeders, but you can go ahead and give them a just standard houseplant fertilizer. In the spring and summer months, always cut your fertilizers in half when you're working with indoor houseplants. And you don't need to even do it monthly. I mean, you could do it monthly, but I would probably be doing it like every 2 or 3 months, probably just 3 times throughout the growing season myself, maybe at the beginning, the middle, and the end of the growing season. And you can also spray the foliage with an orchid fertilizer spray. That's also a tip that I've learned from you guys that perhaps is the reason why my Hoya curtisii is looking so fantastic, combined with the sunlight, which I think is the most important thing. Natural light is best, but if you gotta work with grow lights, it's fine. I've just found the best growth on my Hoyas with natural lights. So that's definitely the most important takeaway from today's video. So thank you guys so much for joining me today. If you don't already, follow me on Instagram at Philly Foliage. You can subscribe to my Patreon for even more houseplant content. Subscribe to my channel, and I will see you guys in my next video. Have a great day.